In this video, I'm going to share with you what you need to do if you have inherited retirement accounts from 2020 to today to make sure that you avoid penalties and unnecessary tax. Hey, my name is Rachael Camp, and I'm a financial planner and the founder of Camp Wealth, and I have been getting a ton of questions on inherited IRAs with the recent rule changes. So I'm excited to dive in and share with you exactly what you need to do if you find yourself as the beneficiary of one of these accounts. In 2020, the rules for inherited IRAs changed with the Secure Act, and these new rules impacted non-spouse beneficiaries specifically. So if you're a spousal beneficiary, the rules are simple. You can assume the IRA as your own, or you can use stretch provisions. The goal with the Secure Act in 2020 was to eliminate the stretch provisions for non-spouse beneficiaries. So pre-2020, if you inherited, let's say, your mother's IRA, you could actually stretch out those distributions from the account over your lifetime. But the IRS decided they wanted their tax dollars quicker. So they condensed this distribution period to just 10 years. Again, for most non-spouse beneficiaries. So let's dive into the 10-year rule first. If you are a non-spouse beneficiary of an IRA, you likely have to follow the 10-year rule. There are a few exceptions here, which I'll get into later. Now, the 10-year rule is simple. You have to deplete the inherited IRA in 10 years following the year of death. So if you inherited an IRA in 2020, the IRA must be fully depleted, meaning a $0 balance by 2030. But what about years 1 through 9? Could I, hypothetically, delay withdrawing any money from my inherited IRA for a full 10 years? Depends. And it depends on something called the required beginning date. Now that we know you have to deplete the account in 10 years, the second question we have to ask ourselves is, do I have required distributions from the inherited IRA in years 1 through 9? And this depends on the decedent's age at the time of death. If the decedent had hit the required beginning date, which is the date the decedent must have started taking RMDs, then you, as the beneficiary, must continue taking those RMDs. To put it simply, if the decedent was already taking RMDs, you have to continue them. If they hadn't hit that required beginning date, then no distributions are required from you from the inherited IRA in years 1 through 9. Now let's walk through an example. Let's say you inherit your father's IRA in 2020 and he was 80 years old when he passed. Now he was well past RMD age, so he was already taking those RMDs. In fact, he had been for years. So you must continue to take those distributions in years 1 through 9, and you must deplete the account in 10 years. Now, for exactly how much you need to take every year, this is actually a complex formula based on several factors, but there are online calculators that make it really simple, and I'll link one of them below. Now, let's walk through a second example and assume your father wasn't 80, but let's say he was 65 when he passed. Well, his RMD age would have been 73, so he hadn't gotten there yet to start his RMDs. What this means for you is that you do not have to take any money out of the inherited IRA in years 1 through 9. Now, just because you don't have to doesn't mean you shouldn't. We'll get into more of the strategy behind how to manage these accounts later on in the video. Now, you may be thinking, okay, makes sense. I continue RMDs if RMDs had already started. If not, then I don't have to. Simple. But what about those pesky Roth accounts? I didn't think Roth IRAs had RMDs, and they don't. They don't have lifetime RMDs. So if you inherit the Roth IRA as a non-spouse beneficiary, your only rule is the 10-year rule. This just means that we need to deplete the account in 10 years for inherited Roth IRAs. Now, this is a good time to get into some of those exceptions that I mentioned earlier. Notice I keep saying these rules apply to most non-spouse beneficiaries. So it's correct to assume that most non-spouse beneficiaries now have to follow the 10-year rule. But here are the exceptions you need to know. One of the exceptions is minor children or children under the age of 21, disabled or chronically ill individuals, and the most common exception I see is for individuals who are not more than 10 years younger than the decedent. If you fall under one of those exceptions, you are actually considered an eligible designated beneficiary, and you get to follow the old stretch provisions instead of the new 10-year rule, meaning you get to stretch out distributions from the account over your lifetime, which from a tax perspective is better for you and gives you a lot more flexibility. The most common person I see using this exception is siblings. So let's walk through an example. Let's assume your brother was 50 years old when he passed and you are 45 years old when you inherit his IRA and Roth IRA. So like I mentioned, you are an exception. You follow under the eligible designated beneficiary because you are not more than 10 years younger than your brother. Therefore, no 10-year rule required here, and you can instead use stretch provisions. This is one of the only times you will see a Roth IRA have RMDs. Because you are following the stretch provisions, you have to take from both the traditional and the Roth IRA every year, spread out over your life. Now let's dive into tax strategy specifically for the 10-year rule. I'm seeing a lot of people potentially get in trouble with this because while you may not have to take out money in years 1 through 9, delaying pulling money out until year 10 could create a massive tax bomb in year 10 for you. So when you inherit an IRA, look at the next 10 years and be strategic. Are you retiring in the next 10 years? Maybe you're retiring in 4 years, and this could be a great opportunity to delay any major withdrawals until you are fully retired and in a lower tax bracket, and you can use this inherited IRA as your initial income source for yourself in your first years of retirement. Are you starting Social Security in the next 10 years? You may want to actually accelerate withdrawals from the inherited accounts before you turn on your Social Security income. Are you expecting any major income changes in the next 10 years? Plan around them with this account because again, has to be depleted within 10 years, but you can be strategic with how you decide to deplete the account. Very rarely is the optimal strategy to delay all withdrawals until year 10. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video valuable, then you should check out this video on traditional versus Roth IRAs to see why the traditional versus Roth decision has a massive impact not only for your beneficiaries, but for your taxes during your lifetime.